prayer, and today we'll be going into the 13 mandatory requisites, wajibat, of the prayer. So among them, the wajibat of these prayers are, first one, to say the word Allahu Akbar specifically, as opposed to any other phrase, like saying Subhanallah and then starting your salah. No, it has to be Allahu Akbar. That is at the beginning of every prayer, which is called the tahrima. Now, what happens, before I go into even the other 12, what happens if a person intentionally omits this? If a person intentionally omits it, they are a sinner, number one. Number two, the prayer itself is invalid. Even sajda sahwi will not make it up, salah has to be repeated, because it's intentionally done, omitted. If a person does it by accident, any of these 13 that I'll be mentioning, sajda sahwi, the forgetfulness prostration, can alleviate or compensate for the lack of this accidental missing. So again, Allahu Akbar specifically. Let's say a person accidentally said Subhanallah, or just started, didn't say Allahu Akbar. So starting without saying it is different from saying something else to initiate it. Not saying it, you've missed completely initiating the salah. It's invalid. Is saying something else like Subhanallah, Alhamdulillah, and starting it off by accident, salah is still good, sajda sahwi must be done. Number two, recite the Surah Fatiha as well as a surah or 3 verses after in any 2 rakats of the obligatory prayers or all rakats of the voluntary prayers. Most of us are familiar with Fatiha being, again, in the Shafi madhab, if you omit that, salah is invalid. In the Hanafi madhab, you can omit this if you can compensate for it with another surah, but in terms of time, having the luxury, not having to be restricted due to constraint of time, salah will not be complete without Surah Fatiha. Okay, so Surah Fatiha as well as a surah of 3 verses. I remember we mentioned and we discussed the minimum that I spoke to you about if time is running out, how to perform that salah. And I mentioned you can even do it with 1 verse. But again, that is a salah, that is a dire need situation. And we're not talking about that. We're talking about a person has the time, has the luxury. So reciting Surah Fatiha is wajib, mandatory. A person misses that, or 3 verses of a surah after that, any of these 2, a person would be liable to do sajda sahwi to make it up accidentally, not intentionally. Number 3, to do the above recitation specifically in the first 2 rakats of the obligatory prayer. This recitation is specifically for the obligatory prayer, sajda sahwi would need to be done. If it's missed in a non-obligatory prayer, it is not a wajib. It is not a wajib in the non-obligatory prayers. Number 4, to perform prostration with most of the forehead and the hard part of the nose. Most of the forehead and the hard part of the nose. If a person performs it where they meet either one, there are various different rulings of them. Again, the objective is to make sure you have forehead and the nose both connected to the ground. Is the salah valid with a person performing it? In the Hanafi madhab, the nose is the requirement, and I believe in other madhab it is the forehead. We'll take questions afterwards, inshallah. Number 5, to perform the second prostration before moving on to the other parts of the prayer. So again, performing the second prostration before moving on to the other parts of the prayer. That is a wajibat. So you're performing the prostration, you come and you're in the second prostration, you cannot just get up. Even though 1 sajda is done, that is an obligation. Wajib is to do the 2. So if a person did 1 sajda and got up, salah is still valid. But it's wajib to do the second prostration. Okay. Number 6, to be still for at least a moment. And that moment is defined in the salah as saying 1 subhanallah. So for every movement, whether you're going into ruku, whether you're coming up from ruku, qawma, whether you're going down to sajda and then sitting before you go into the second sajda, you have to wait for a moment. And that moment is defined as subhanallah. That much, you have to wait. That is again integral part of the prayer. It is a wajib. If someone moves quickly, too quickly, and they realize they didn't even stand for one moment, sajda sahwi is required. Okay. Number 7, the first sitting, meaning when you are in tashahhud and you're sitting down, that first sitting, if it's in 4 rakats, will be considered the first. If it's in the 3 rakats, again, it will be considered the first. If it's in 2 rakats, it is the first and the last. It's the only one. All of these sittings, you have to sit the duration of the tashahhud at-tahiyyat, at least that much duration. If a person doesn't sit that much, sajda sahwi become wajib on them as well. But remember, we didn't say recitation of the tashahhud, of at-tahiyyat, just the sitting itself. Number 8, to recite the entire tashahhud in both sittings. To recite the entire tashahhud in both sittings. So one is a person who, let's say, doesn't know at-tahiyyat. They have a need where they can sit just that duration and it will suffice for them. That is an obligation. A wajib is that they have to recite at-tahiyyat. And if you know it, you cannot intentionally miss it. But let's say a person knew it, sat there, didn't recite it, did salam, but sat there enough time. Sajda sahwi is wajib. After they do salam, they need to go to sajda sahwi and then do it again. And these are again wajibat. They have to do the forgetfulness sajda. Number 9, to say the word as-salam. To say the word as-salam is from the wajib. So it is acceptable to say, instead of saying assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, you can say as-salam, as-salam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah is from the sunnah of Rasulullah. So salam itself, finishing the salam, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah is sunnah. Forgetting to say that, a person forgets to say that and just finishes the salah and doesn't say salam, and it's just kind of idle. And what does it mean to be idle? And that also applies when a person, let's say, finishes reciting Surah Fatiha in a surah, or finishes reciting Surah Fatiha in the 4th or 5th, the 3rd or 4th rakat, the 4 rakats, or is in ruku, does 3 subhanallah and then forgets and just stays there. If a person stays in a particular position after they have accomplished what they were supposed to do, what was required in that position, for the duration of 3 subhanallah, for the duration of 3 subhanallah. So a person sitting down, for example, he finishes the tashahhud, the tahiyyat, and then supposed to get up for the 3rd rakat, and it's just sitting there, idle, not doing anything. Subhanallah, subhanallah, subhanallah. If that much time elapses, sajda sahwi is required. If they get up or they move forward in their movement, in their motion, in their recitation, whatever it may be, then sajda sahwi is not required. So that is being idle. To recite, number 10, to recite the qunut in the witr prayer. Qunut, alhamdulillah, a lot of people know. For those of us who don't know, qunut, the objective is dua. So if a person doesn't know the qunut, you can recite many du'as from the Quran. Some of them, for example, رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً وَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ. That's sufficient. If a person doesn't even know that much, a person can recite Allahumma ghfirli, Allahumma ghfirli, Allahumma ghfirli 3 times. Person can't do that. Ya Rab, Ya Rab, Ya Rab. That will suffice for qunut until you memorize it, until you are able to do it. But that is again an integral part of salah, wajib of salah. Number 11, to recite the 6 extra takbirat of the 2 Eids. That is again according to the Hanafi madhab, where you have 3. In the Shafi madhab, and also acceptable in the Hanafi madhab, is the 7 in the first rakah and 5 in the second rakah. Right? So these are the integral parts. And we saw many times people coming for Eid Salah, they came in the second rakah, they made up the first rakah, but they did not do the takbirat. And it was wajib for them. So the least they had to do was to do sajda sahwi. But they didn't do that. So we saw many people, almost 20, 30 people coming in for Eid Salah late. And those who came even for the first rakah, unfortunately not knowing how to make up that Eid. And how many people are we going to go to explain your Eid Salah is in jeopardy? So having to do sajda sahwi, if you missed the takbirat accidentally, intentionally you cannot. And if you want to make it up, then a person, when the Imam says salam, you would do your takbirat in that position. While you're sitting down, you will do the extra takbirat, and then you would do the salam. If you join the Imam initially, and he's in the first rakat, and you have time to do the takbirat, you can join the Imam in the first rakat while he's reciting. Do your takbirat and then join. So these things, again, a lot of education is required, and at that moment, unfortunately, some people, that is the only prayer they make in the entire year. May Allah forgive us. What can you explain? And number 12, for the Imam to recite Quran out loud in the first two rakats of the loud obligatory prayers. That is, again, if the Imam is there and the Imam starts the salah and it's jahri salah, you're supposed to recite out loud, and the Imam is not reciting out loud. Salah is still valid, but the Imam would have to do sajda salah. It's an integral part to recite out loud. If you are alone reciting, reading Fajr, Maghrib, or Isha, it's up to you whether you want to do it out loud or silently. You can do both. You can do both. 13, for both the Imam and the one praying alone to recite the Quran silently in the other rakats of the obligatory prayer, you cannot recite out loud in those prayers which are silent prayers even when you're alone. And if you do recite out loud, that is a mistake. That is, again, requires sajda sahwi. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow me and all of us to act upon this and to understand what has been conveyed. Forgive us for any shortcomings. Jazakallah khair. I'm going to stop the video.